Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Fighting Fantasy. In this series I am going to attempt to complete all the game books that have been released in some kind of relevant digital form in order. And by relevant I mean that there are some versions which are not direct adaptations but reimagining with gameplay added, graphics added and stuff like that. I am not going to play those. I'm going to play the digital versions of the game books directly. This is book 1, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and we are playing the Fighting Fantasy Classics version available on mobile and PC on Steam. This is a superb adaptation of the few game books that they have released, 12 so far as of the making of this video. And this is going to be, like all others, a 100% playthrough, which means that we are going to go and see all that the book has to offer that can be visited in one playthrough. Now what that means is that I'm going to go out of my way to find encounters and rooms that are optional or even detrimental. Obviously I'm going to skip any options that would cause my character to die, but I will show not only the optimum path but everything that can be visited in such a playthrough. That means that we are going to suffer some damage and we are going to have some negative effects in most of the game books, just so that we can really see all that can be achieved in one playthrough. We are still not going to see everything that the game book has to offer, because there are some parallel paths and obviously we have to take the correct one. So that means that if you are interested in fighting fantasy game books, you are still going to have a lot to look for. Actually, some of the more exciting and interesting encounters are located on paths that block you off from achieving the good ending. In a nutshell, we are going to have to get to the end of the book while collecting 3 specific keys, and as you probably know, there is only one true path to get them. Now without further ado, let us begin. So unlike the book version, which has only one level of difficulty, the Fighting Fantasy Classics app allows us to play on 3 different difficulty settings. Adventurer is the standard one for which corresponds to the difficulty in the books. Free read is a cheater mode where all kinds of cheats are allowed, including instant healing, all options are always unlocked, etc. And they have introduced a new harder difficulty setting called Hardcore Hero. It differs from the standard level in 2 points, and I'm going to explain the differences when we get there, but we are going to play through the game on Hardcore Hero, of course. So first thing we have to do is roll for our character. If you are familiar with the books, then you know what this means. There are 3 attributes that we have to roll for while generating our character. The first one is called stamina. It's our health or hit points. It is a 2d6 on a base of 12, so anywhere between 14 and 24. Now these rolls are probably the most important moves that you have to do when playing this game or any kind of fighting fantasy game book. And what that means is that I will really have to aim for relatively high stats. That means that if I don't get the correct rolls, I will have to uh, restart the game. So this might take a while, but in the meantime I can explain some more stuff in detail at least. For stamina, I'm going to aim at least stamina level of 20, initial stamina level of 20, because the initial and the maximum level for each attribute is the same. So rolling a high stat is crucial for success. Alright, we managed to roll a 10, which is amazing. That means that our starting and maximum stamina is 22 out of the maximum possible 24. This is far better than expected and more than what we need. So let's move on. The next one is called skill. The skill attribute is the main attribute for battles. It's also the secondary attribute for attribute checks. There are sometimes skill checks in the game. And this is one of the areas that Hardcore Hero differs from the standard difficulty setting. In Hardcore Hero difficulty, the attribute is a 1d6 on top of a base of 4, whereas in the original books it's a 1d6 on a base of 6, so basically it's 2 points lower, anywhere between 5 and 10. In order to beat the game, you really need a relatively high skill stat, but the way we play it, it's essential that we get a complete successful roll of 6, thereby getting a starting and maximum skill level of 10, which is not very high, by the way. So it's 2 points lower than the theoretical maximum of 12 in the books. We absolutely need that in order to be able to stand our ground in some of the battles, so we are probably looking at a lot of restarts before we can move on. Yeah, so our first roll was a 1, yielding a skill level of 5, which is 2 points lower than the minimum possible number at the standard difficulty setting. With a skill of 5 you cannot win this game, in my opinion. I mean, even if you take the optimum paths and if you skip all the encounters. So I will have to try again. So bear with me, this might take a while. We are also going to check all the encounters, as I've mentioned, but I am not going to fight all the enemies if I can avoid it. The spirit of fighting fantasy is that you are often able to employ your wits or items or knowledge that you have gathered to get out of tricky situations, and we are going to do just that. It fits the game narrative. That being said, we are still looking at a lot of upcoming battles, because as I've said, we are going to go to all the optional rooms, and there are a lot of rooms and encounters in this game and in all of the fighting fantasy books. Warlock of Firetop Mountain was the first book ever released. I'm not going to talk about the history of this book. There's plenty of material available online, and it's quite a legendary story of how this book came to be and what it represents. It's not the best game book in the series by far, but it is remembered as one of the most pivotal entries of the series. And I'm going to give a quick review at the end when we finish, if everything goes well. The great thing about this first book ever released is that it already established all the basic rules and flow of the game, which is quite amazing for a first try. So not much has been modified since then. And with that we have managed to roll a 6 finally. So on a base of 4 it means our skill is 10, which is the maximum attainable level on this difficulty setting. It's still not great, as I've said, but it's the best we can hope for. And our third, our final attribute is luck. Luck is the secondary attribute in battles and the primary attribute for attribute checks. And the thing with luck is that whenever you use it, you roll against it. Under any circumstance, it gets lower by 1, so you lose 1 luck point. Fortunately, there are a lot of ways and a lot of parts in the books where you can restore luck points, but we are still going to have to manage it relatively carefully. Luck in all difficulty settings is a 1d6 on a base of 6, so anywhere between 7 and 12. We really would like to have at least an 11 here, so this is a pretty important stat. A 10 is enough, so let's see what we roll. Okay, unfortunately an 8 is not going to be enough to win the game, so I'll have to restart. Again, I apologize for this, but that's just how dice rolls work. In this version of the game books, you can actually cheat in all difficulty levels, by the way. So it doesn't matter which one you choose. You can still nudge the dice and hope for a better result, but I've deliberately, intentionally turned off dice animation, and we are using what's called quick dice, which is what you are seeing here, that the results are given automatically without the ability of interference. This is done for 2 reasons. First of all, I don't like cheating, obviously. This is a legit playthrough. And second, because you can actually sometimes ruin your own good rolls if you click too soon after the dice are rolled, and I have managed to ruin some of my rolls in the past before I realized that you can turn this feature off. The other cheating option that is always available on all difficulty settings is the bookmarks or save game. So you can save scum this game. It has a weird save system where you have unlimited saves, but the game doesn't tell you where you saved it. It just gives you the entry number, which tells you nothing. So if you use it too much, then you're probably going to get lost on it, and they get deleted after you've completed the game, even if you die, by the way. So these games were, I mean, the books themselves were created with the intention that you would restart over and over again until you until you get to the end of it. So this is part of the fun, or part of the strategy of playing these games. Obviously we are not going to use bookmarks either. If you know what you're doing, you don't need to use them, and you can exit the game and your progress will be saved anyway, so it's not like they're mandatory for anything. On a side note, if you're going into any of these books blind, then I highly recommend that you take hardcore hero difficulty. The books are relatively easy and the difficulty does not come from these artificial differences. So I actually play on this difficulty even when I look at the new books. So anyway, we managed to roll an almost perfect attribute rolls, all 3 of them. We rolled a 6, so our luck is at the possible maximum of 12, which is great. And now we need to make our final option, to make our final decision before starting out. We need to select 1 potion to take on with us. All potions restore your respective attributes, and they are a one-time use item only. Now, I highly recommend you never take Potion of Skill, at least in this book, because there are very few areas where your skill level is lowered. A Potion of Fortune is usually the best option to go for, because it not only refills your luck point, but it actually raises the maximum luck level by 1 permanently. So this is a great way to start out. But for now we are going to start out, since our luck is at maximum 12, or it could be raised above that, so it could be raised to 13, but that is not needed for a successful playthrough. Instead, I'm going to play it safe and use a Potion of Strength, or take a Potion of Strength with us, which refills our stamina, so our health completely. This is a very powerful item, and definitely the second best after the Potion of Fortune. And we are going to go with this one. Now, the last thing we need to do before heading out and starting our adventure is to review our items list. We begin our adventure with a standard sword and shield. It is confirmed later that it is a wooden shield. They are not magical. They do not represent anything. They do not add to our stats. They just allow us to fight. Standard leather armor, same. And a backpack containing provisions, as well as a lantern to light our way. So none of these items are useful in any way except for the provisions. The backpack simply allows us to carry an infinite number of items that we pick up, so we don't need to manage our inventory. And the lantern is simply just a gimmick, a MacGuffin that allows us to see in the cavern that we are going to explore. The only thing that's worth mentioning is the provisions. Provisions are health items, so when you consume them, you restore 4 stamina points, and you can consume them at any point in the book, even multiple units or portions of provisions. In the original rule set, you start out with 10 provisions, which is ridiculous. You never need, I have never needed to use more than 3 in any of my playthroughs. If you die, which is quite often in these game books, then you die not because you've ran out of provisions, but because you've made a mistake or you had a bad battle. In any way, this is the second difference between standard and hardcore hero difficulty. We start out with only 3 units or portions of provisions, which as I've just said, is plenty. It's absolutely sufficient. There are other ways to restore health, including our Potion of Strength, and other areas or encounters in the book allow us to heal up. We can also, and we will also, obtain extra extra provisions along the way. So this is not a significant detriment or a significant disadvantage to our hero. And with that, we are ready to begin. May the luck of the gods go with us on the adventure ahead. But before we do so, let us quickly take a look at our stats. So, as you can see, here's everything sketched up, just as I've explained it. And we are going to collect our items, equipment, whatever we find. Currency, we will find a lot of gold during our way. This will all be written down here, and we have great stats to begin with. This is almost the maximum possible number, so we're only missing 2 potential stamina points, which is not needed, by the way, at all. So with that, I feel confident, and we are ready to begin. Only a foolhardy adventurer would embark upon such a perilous quest without first finding out as much as possible about the mountain and its treasures. Before your arrival at the foot of Firetop Mountain, We spent several days with the humble townsfolk of a village some 2 days' journey from the base. Being a likable sort of person, we found it easy to get on with the locals. Although they told many stories about the mysterious Warlock sanctuary, we could not feel sure that all, or indeed any, of these were based on fact. The villagers had seen many adventurers pass through on their way to the mountain, but very few ever returned. The journey ahead was extremely dangerous, that we knew for certain. Of those who returned to the village, none contemplated going back to Firetop Mountain. There seemed to be some truth in the rumor that the Warlock's treasure was stored in a magnificent chest with 2 locks, and the keys to these locks were guarded by various creatures within the dungeons. The Warlock himself was a sorcerer of great power. Some described him as old, others as young. Some said his power came from an enchanted deck of cards, others from the silky black gloves that he wore. The entrance to the mount was guarded by a pack of warty-faced goblins, stupid creatures, fond of their food and drink. Towards the inner chambers, the creatures became more fearsome. To reach the inner chambers, we would have to cross a river. The ferry service was regular, but the ferrymen enjoyed good barter, so we should save a gold piece for the trip. The locals also encouraged us to keep a good map for our wanderings, for without a map, we would end up hopelessly lost within the mountain. When it finally came to our day of leaving, the whole village turned out to wish us a safe journey. Tears came to the eyes of many of the villagers, young and old alike. We couldn't help wondering whether they were tears of sorrow shed by eyes which would never see us alive again. Okay, so a few things to note here. Our quest is to kill and rob the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, who we know to be evil because he has dealt with all these adventurers in the past who have tried to rob and kill him. He is not threatening anyone, he is a recluse, the lord of this weird place, and whenever anybody enters his lair, then he makes short work of them. For his sin, we are going to dispose of him and take his treasure for ours. We have a decent description of the dungeon already, and this part is interesting. We should save a gold piece for the trip. We start out with 0 gold pieces, so we will need to find some if we want to employ the ferryman service. This part also tells us to use a map. There is an auto map in this version of the app, but it's not very useful. So we will just basically have to go after our wits. And that's it really. Since we are nothing more than a robber or a thief, I try to find an appropriate portrait of a likable yet somewhat sinister fellow. And we are ready to go. Let us begin. And by begin, I mean let us end the video here. I'm going to make the cut here, and we will continue from exactly here when we return. I thank you all for watching, and I hope I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.